Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Tommy, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey, everybody, it's Matt Tommy, and thanks again for being on the podcast with me. Today, I'm so excited to have my friend Lorie McCown with me, who is not only a great person and just really incredible teacher, but she's an incredible fiber artist, internationally renowned, may I say. And so, Lorie, it's just such a pleasure to have you on today.
Matt, it's great to be here, and thank you so much for asking me. I'm always happy to chat with you about art and everything else involved with it. So.
Absolutely. We've gotten to know each other over the last few years working with the Gathering of Artisans Conference, and you've been so incredible to come teach and be a part of that. But just to not even beyond that, just to see the work that you do and just your life on social media and all that sort of thing. It's just, you're living a beautiful life and you're creating beautiful things. And it's,
well, it's, I'm very, very blessed to be able to do that. And I don't take it for granted. And as you and a lot of other people know, it's a lot of work, but when you're doing something that you love and you feel like you have something to say, I think it makes it worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a little bit about how you got started, because, your work, I love the visceral nature of your work. That, I'm obviously a fiber person as well. So I love anything tactile and all of that. How did that start to bubble up inside of you early on, and how'd you get to where you are now?
Well, very, very short story, actually. I grew up in Southern California and was very fortunate enough to have parents who sort of got me as far as art making goes. They weren't artists themselves, but they supported me, and I was able to go to a university out there and study art, which I think was the bedrock of everything. I've always been a maker. I think a lot of artists say that. Started with painting and drawing, and then out of college ended up marrying a military man, such as it is, and traveled the world. But I always maintain a small art studio, usually with painting because that was a bit more portable.
Right.
But I had also started to do some sewing, and I had taken a weaving class when I was in college. Loved the teacher, and I think that's really was a key thing. Was she was just so enthusiastic about non-traditional, this was in the 80s, non-traditional materials and methods. She was a really forward thinker, and I really sort of jived with her.
Right.
And so I think that was already always there. So sort of fast forward a little bit, 3 kids later, I ended up working all kinds of different jobs, worked for the government, believe it or not, at one point. And then took a quilting class, a traditional quilting class, and really loved, like you said, the tactile, touching the fabric, sewing, and went on with that for a while. And then attended a quilt show nearby. I live in Virginia now, and just was blown away by the whole art quilt movement. And this is probably back in the late 1994, 1995.
Okay.
And was just blown away by the way quilt artists were using their materials, really essentially painting with fabric, thread, and such. And that was sort of it for traditional quilting for me. I came home and I just it was like a door had opened up, and permission was granted.
Sort of that aha moment in your process, I guess.
It was. So yeah, from there I've really sort of not looked back, and have enjoyed exploring themes, sometimes very directly associated with Christianity, but not always. Interpretation is a big thing, as you know, with art. So yeah, that's sort of the short, condensed version of the traveling right now.
Yeah, I'm always interested because you move as freely in fiber as you do in painting and kind of back and forth. And one of the things that I'm always trying to help artists develop, especially emerging artists, is that focus in their work, because, we all kind of start out as dabblers, I call it. And then,
Right. Right.
we start to kind of find our voice and pare down what we're doing.
Mm,
And yet, as soon as you say, you've got to focus, then you
mm,
see somebody like you who is, working in multiple mediums, even like me. Now
mm,
I'm not only in basketry, but I'm working with clay and metal and things like that.
mm, mm.
What was that process like for you, where you focused, but now you've kind of expanded? You're doing a little bit of several mediums. So how
Yeah.
does that process for you?
I probably have always kept a sketchbook and drawn and painted. I feel sort of like that's the mothership, if you will.
Mm.
So I guess that makes me a 2D thinker. I would love to be a 3D thinker, and I really tried to explore that a bit, particularly in the last couple of years. Um, but I think, Matt, I think it coalesces together when you sort of step back and think about your themes. And I think for any artist worth their, salt, um, should really. I'm a huge believer in keeping a sketchbook, whether it be electronic or just paper and pencil, the old-fashioned way.
Right.
I think that develops the things you care about, if for lack of more eloquent terms, and it you can keep a record. And as I tell my students, write stuff down. It doesn't have to be grand poetry or sonnets, but you will find that certain things resurface over and over and over again. So regardless of what the media is, be it glass or clay or paper or you name it, you've got it all these days. I think that honing in on your themes, and themes can be something as easy as nature.
Right.
And I tell my students, so what about nature? Do you care about the environment? Is it what is it that is sparking you to come back to that theme over and over again? So for me, I guess it's maybe form following function
Sure, sure.
in a academic sort of a term. But and how you express it, well, that's your craftsmanship, isn't it? That's
Right.
what you've been trained to do, whether it be basket making or painting or drawing or even expanding into music, theater, that sort of thing. So very encompassing sort of a feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good.
Mm.
You mentioned, not all of your work has overtly Christian themes and that sort of thing. And I think that's wonderful. I think, all of us should be exploring all of the different themes that come up in our work. But talk a little bit about how your spiritual life and your connection with the Lord influences your work. Because, for some people, that's a very upfront sort of narrative that they're trying to build into everything they're doing. And then for other people, it's sort of this stream that runs underneath everything. So how is that for you?
For me, it's who I am. There's that song, isn't it? But I'm not going to sing for you today.
That's right.
but it is, and I came to Christianity a little later in life. I was an adult when I professed my faith, and I used to think of that as a detriment. I didn't know every hymn by heart. I was not familiar with a lot of Christian, quote terms. And
right.
now I feel quite differently. I feel like I don't have a whole lot of baggage I have to overcome. So not that that's so great, but I think of course, as the Bible has, everyone comes to Christ in a different path. They all
Sure.
come. So for me, the expression of the art is, and let's back up for 1 second. Of course, Christian art comes with so much baggage.
Oh, yeah. The terminology. Sure.
From Michelangelo to Da Vinci, I mean, everybody's, Sistine Chapel. You can't,
yeah, sure.
you can't ignore it. So I think sometimes the term has such a loaded content to it that people freeze. And so maybe it's, and I got to admit, sometimes I do too. You fall into, I have to illustrate the Bible in these beautiful, wonderful ways when maybe that's not you're being called to do. Maybe
Sure.
Maybe you're trying to, for example, express, your path or the path that you see people around you taking. And it's not always pleasant and flowers and rainbows and you know, I mean, sometimes it's you know, it's teeth gnashing for me.
Yeah.
So I guess sometimes that leads you down some dark paths, but I think, you know, Jesus himself went into the wilderness several times.
Absolutely.
You know, that is, it's worthy of um, exploring, I think.
That's good. You know, as you look back at your own life, I know you said, you know, you came to the Lord later in life and maybe had worked through some of those roadblock kind of issues in your creative process, but were there any struggles for you mindset wise or just technique wise or anything like that that you're like, wow, when I busted through this, I really started kind of stepping into the fullness of who I am as an artist?
Yeah, and I have to say it's still ongoing, Matt. I mean, I don't know.
What? You're not perfect?
Yeah. You know,
Lorie.
especially on a Monday morning, right? Wow. But I think a couple things. One of the main things lately I've found, and I don't know, maybe you're the same, Matt, is I've had to sort of sequester myself from a lot of social media.
Yeah.
I think social media is a great tool, but it also can be very, very overwhelming and intimidating. And I have the tendency to overstimulate myself with a lot of the garbage that's out there. And
Sure.
I think when I and I think this boils down to the one of the most important things, and it's so boring and so unromantic, but it's keeping a schedule. And as an artist, you can get very distracted. There's lots of pretty shiny things out there to go look at. And I think when I started to focus in on my schedule, and again, I know that sounds so boring, and artists want like, oh, I came across the mountaintop and saw it, you know.
That's right.
But I'm sorry, it's like, okay, I allow myself, you know, a certain amount of time in the morning to check emails and do all of that. So it's sort of, it's not a daily grind, but it is a daily thing that I have to keep in the back of my mind to keep me on track. So,
Right.
and that allows for the very important studio time. And my studio time, it's not cleaning the studio, it's not sitting around shuffling papers, it's making. And sometimes it's very productive and it's wonderful, and sometimes it's not. And to be able to accept that, and that is part of I write on the board of every one of my classes, trust the process.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's not, we get so wrapped up and it has to be pretty and beautiful, and you know, you got to have that ugly teenager in there sometimes to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of us have to, I know for me, I mean, you know, Cameron's 14 right now and my wife still works at a high school, and, you know, there's this rhythm of life, you know, so,
Sure.
you know, I'm in the studio at 8:00 in the morning till 4 because that's our family schedule, you know, but
Right.
other people work late at night. But I think it's true, finding that rhythm that works for you and really honoring that in your life is huge.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And treat it as such. Treat it as that sacred time of, you know, you wouldn't, any other kind of a job, you wouldn't just, oh, I'm going to go watch TV, or I'm going to do this
sure.
or that, or walk the dog. It's like, no, that's the time to be creative and to tap into that. So,
Yeah, and I find that just when I do that, when I honor that and I see other people honor that, I think the Lord honors that in our life, that there's grace to move, you know, in those times that, you know, yeah, sometimes you come up empty, you come in the studio and like, man,
yeah.
I don't want to be here, or I'm just, you know, I need to get this done, but it's not the most inspiring today. But
Yeah.
I find when I give myself to that process that I always am glad that I did at the end of the day. So
again, you know, not trusting the process, and sometimes you feel like you're going through the motions, and you are.
that's right.
It's okay.
And it's okay, right? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get product you know, oriented, especially,
Yes.
you know, I'm in a obviously gallery space here, so people are in all the time and can you make me this? And I'm like, you know, well, yeah, I can do that, but you know, I'm also trying to make the thing that's in my heart over here as well. And so, you know, being able to balance that. So talk a little bit, I guess, you know, you've been in this journey a long time, like I have, as others are asking you advice. And, you know, Lorie, what's the one thing? what's the one thing that's going to change my life? As an artist, if you could give your piece of sage advice to a young artist, or even an artist coming back to their art, later in life, and trying to really pursue it, what would you say, beyond the things that we've talked about?
And here, another very unromantic thing to say. But first of all, I mean, know that you're a child of God. I mean, we cannot be reminded of that enough, can we? Every day. I mean, we don't always feel it. But here's another thing, Matt, that I found very, very useful. And I've had to practice this as, now I've gotten to be a little more mature, but is to be able to talk about your art and talk about it in a non-apologetic, non-self-depreciating, talk about your art like it matters and it's important and it's something that you're proud of. And I see this over and over and over again. And I almost want to develop a whole class or something on this, is that talk about a piece of your art without saying something bad about it. I made this mistake, or I did this, or this took me in a direction that I didn't like, or didn't, to really be confident. I guess this is sort of like a public speaking thing, but even you, like when people come into your gallery one-on-one, be able to be coherent about what you're presenting. And again, it takes practice. And sometimes you're not even sure what you're working on is,
Sure.
But that has just such connection with people, and they may or may not, you've done the thing where you talk and people get that sort of shuttered eyes on,
right.
art speak starts but to be able to actually, say something about what you're doing, you're spending so much time doing this, practice a little about your presentation and how, not necessarily how you'd like people to see it, but that makes a connection with collectors. It makes a connection with people who remember your work and you. And that really starts to cultivate not only the person who's looking at the art, but it cultivates your ability to talk about it.
Right.
I can't stress that enough, particularly in this day and age of, everyone just has to promote the heck out of themselves, and it gets quite tiresome.
Sure.
But I think that ability goes a long way. And
well, I totally agree. I mean, the core of what I teach in our mentoring program is that, nobody needs art, but, nobody buys art because they need it. They buy art because of connection, either with the piece or with the artist or whatever. And so the more that we can build that connection over time through media, social media, through one-on-one connection, or the stories that we're telling is just huge. So that's really big. And I think, you've seen this, just over the years. I think it's getting easier for artists to build that connection because we don't have to go through galleries exclusively anymore. Have you seen a freedom come in your own connection with that? Just that there's more opportunity now to connect with buyers than there used to be.
I think so. And the old system of, you must be represented in a gallery in New York City and such as, if they want to come knocking on my door, I'm more than happy.
Yeah.
But to think that is something that I have to wait for, I think that whole matrix has been smashed.
Right.
I think that has become one way of doing it, but like everything else in this world, the mode for that sort of thing has been really sort of discombobulated. And so I think connection is important. Being true to what you're making, that makes it authentic.
Yeah.
And in turn, that authentic will convey itself, hopefully through you and through your work.
Sure.
But that's where some training, some training to help people. And I think maybe, and I'm not pointing fingers, but sometimes people think they can just dive right into oil painting or dive right into, ceramics, when knowing your craft and how to, manipulate that's, to me, I think sometimes people think they can skip that.
Yeah, exactly.
and getting good training from, well, of course you could do it online and that stuff these days, but
Sure.
knowing what you're doing, and it's a little like dancers training, that body memory that they
Yeah.
do. So
yeah, I think developing that competence, I mean, it takes time, and
yes,
I find the more skill that I develop, the more I want to develop, and the more capacity that I have to create
yes,
within the context of my own imagination,
yes.
So I always tell people that I'm like, don't look down on skill development as unspiritual or unsavory, because it's like, that's the vehicle, if you will, that's taking your your imagination out, to the world. So
those are the tools,
Yeah.
There's motivation, but you also have to have the skills as well to develop it. I agree.
That's good. Well, hey, speaking of skills, they can come see you at Gathering of Artisans this year, and hopefully other years as well. And
Absolutely.
Where else can folks connect with you, Lorie? Because this has been so good, but I know people are going to want to see your work and connect. So find out other classes that you're doing. So
absolutely. I have a class coming up, a weekend class in it's Quilt Surface Design Symposium, which is in Columbus, Ohio. It's coming up in June. And then I have some other things in the make, hopefully this summer. So I try and keep my website. Website's important.
Great.
and do one that you can manipulate yourself, because I found trying to rely on someone else is not, well, at least with my experience, hasn't been very, very good. But
that's right.
I try and keep my teaching schedule pretty up to date on my website, and yeah, so.
So tell everybody what's your website and your Instagram and that sort of thing, Facebook. And
yep, it's easy. It's LorieMcCown.com, and that is my Instagram as well. Keep it simple so I can remember it.
That's right.
And I'm on Facebook as well, although not quite so much as I used to be, with the same, my name, Lorie McCown. So yeah, definitely sign up for some classes in fall, and don't give up.
That's right. That's the key, right? Just stay on the journey. So
keep going. Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you so much for being on with me today. And I know people are encouraged by your story. And if you're listening to the podcast today, in the link on the podcast, you can find all the links to Lorie's website, Facebook, Instagram, and all that, and connect with her on her journey. So thanks so much, Lorie, for being on today.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.